morning, everyone. Welcome to the UBC Learning Circle, hosted by the Center for Excellence in Indigenous Health. Very excited today to have all of these lovely folks here to talk about an Indigenous Elders-led patient medical home, healing center in the downtown east side. First, like to acknowledge the unceded ancestral lands of the Musqueam people, whose traditional territory we are on today. Also like to thank the First Nations Health Authority for generously funding the Learning Circle. And just to remind folks that the Learning Circle topics sometimes can be emotionally triggering, so if you feel you need to talk to someone today, or just ensure that you're looking after yourself in whatever way you need to do that. My name is Melanie Rivers. I'm from the Squamish Nation, and I'm the education coordinator for the UBC Learning Circle. So welcome everyone to today's session. So we have Elder Roberta Price with us today. She'll be opening us off in a good way shortly. Elder Flo, yes, who I'm just meeting, and Dr. David Tu, and Jennifer Dohoney. Yes, so welcome. So I will pass it over to you, Roberta.
Okay, thanks so much. Haijka Siem Siaya. Greetings and welcome to everyone who is present with us by the internet, and are we on the phone too, Melanie?
Video conference.
Oh, video conference. Yeah. So welcome to everyone. So ceremony guided each and every step of each and every day of our lives, as taught to me by my elders. I have in my hand some cedar boughs, as taught to me by my elders. We would pick those cedar boughs each and every morning. We would go into that cold, cold water. We would brush every single part of our bodies off with those cedar boughs. What we are doing is ceremony. We are brushing all the negative and evil energy off of us so we can go about our day in a good and respectful way. As I share many times, I've been going into classrooms here in the Lower Mainland for 32 years now, talking about the First Nations. For everyone watching and everyone present, I ask you to participate with me to share the meaning of negative energy. Raise your hand, folks, if you've ever felt a cranky moment in your life. Feel free to raise too. That, my dear friends, is the meaning of negative energy. Can you do things really well when you are cranky? Maybe extra hard, maybe extra fast, but not really well. So brushing all that negative energy off of you so you can go about your day in a good and respectful way. Other important ceremony, and I wish to go back to the cedar boughs. Part of the power of the sacred cedar boughs when you use them in ceremony puts a protective force around you that will constantly deflect that negative energy off of you as you go about your day. Other important ceremony as taught to me by my elders is a ceremony of introduction. To share your name, your nation, your family. And if it isn't your traditional territory, to always ask for permission to be on that territory. I'll share that with you now. Good morning, everyone. My name is Roberta Price. My heritage is I am Coast Salish. I am Snuneymuxw on my dad's side, and that's where I was born. When they came to our lands, they couldn't say our names. They couldn't say our language. So perhaps when they couldn't say Snuneymuxw, they called it Nanaimo. So I was born there right on the #1 reserve right on the waterfront in Nanaimo. And I am Cowichan on my mom's side. The dialect of the language of my people is taught to me by my elders on this side. The language of my people is called the Halkomelem language. I knew and understood and spoke my language fluently until I was 6 years old. Beyond 6 years old, I was not allowed to have anything to do with my language, my heritage, and my culture. And I was actually tortured about that. I have spent well over 40 years reclaiming back my identity, searching out for my family, and especially searching for my mother. Very, very pleased and proud to finally find my mom when I became a grandmom in 1994. I was able to spend 8 years with my mother before she passed away. My mother affirming all the teachings of all the elders that I worked with her leading up to my mom, felt they were stepping stones to my mom. And I share with you that due to those horrific experiences from age 6 onwards, for many, many years I used the contemporary Western method of healing, counseling in psychiatry and psychology. But I really felt the greatest part of my healing journey came. I call this dear lady a friend today, but she was my boss in the early 80s. My dear friend Flo is now in her 80s, if I may say, Elder Flo. My dear friend Flo, she spent her life in the residential school. My dear friend Flo was also a helper to the elders. She knew what I needed. She brought me to our elders. Those elders, they took me under their wing. They taught me. They guided me. They prayed for me. But mostly importantly of all, what those elders did for me is they loved me. They loved me unconditionally. Unconditionally. Because when you are ripped away from your family, age 3, 4, 5, 6, and older, what you are missing is that unconditional love you receive from your parents, your grandparents, your family, your nation, your community. That unconditional love. They gave it to me lovingly. They gave it to me openly. Never ever dreamed that close to 40 years later, I would be walking in those elders' footsteps today, sharing that same unconditional love with so many and so many communities. We still need it. We still need it very, very much. I hold my hands up to those elders. I hold my hand up to my dear friend, mentor, Elder Flo, who is from the Stotliam Nation, for paving that way for me to do the work that I do today. And I hold my hands up high to her. And I wish to share with all of you out there, as you may know, as elder, you see things. You see things, or you know things, or you feel things. But I want to share with you that those elders, they knew who I was. But I had to find out who I am. Very, very proud to share with each and every one of you today, in the year 2018, I know who I am. And I hold my hands up high to those elders. Give thanks and prayers every single day. I want to share some teachings from some of our Coast Salish elders that dear Flo worked with and brought me to, and I work with many, many years together with Flo and those elders. Our Coast Salish elders, Elder Vince Stogan, right here from the Musqueam First Nations, on which the land we are sharing the teaching with you today. I work with Elder Vince's children, Elders Art and Elders Thelma Stogan, today. I didn't know them close to 40 years ago, but I know them well today. When I can't be at something, they're there. When they can't be at something, I'm there. We're like brothers and sisters. Hold my hands up to our Musqueam relatives. Hold my hands up to Elder Vince Stogan. Work with Elder Bob George on the Tsleil-Waututh Nation for many, many years. I'll hold my hands up to them. Chief Simon Baker from the Squamish Nation. And really hold my hands up to all of those elders. So I want to share the teaching with everyone. And I want to ask everyone who's with us today to join in those teachings to honor our Coast Salish ancestors. Elder Vince's teachings are that whenever we come together, we're normally in a circle. But I work with another elder today, and for many, many years, Elder Fred John, who's from the Stotliam people. We were doing a ceremony one day, I think it was 2009, and someone said, oh, we can't do the ceremony, Elder Fred, we don't have a certain thing. And you know, Elder Fred said, you know what? We're very, very adaptable. We can modernize. We can make this happen. We'll do the ceremony. So we'll do that exact thing. We'll be adaptable for each and every one of us in the room, for all of you out there that have joined us, that will be adaptable. So Elder Vince's teachings are that whenever we come together, we must share a blessing and a prayer to cover our interactions, to cover our words, cover our thoughts. In that blessing and the prayer in the circle, Elder Vince shares that what we do is we join hands. So we're just going to join hands in our row here. And what we do is we put our left palm up. And I'm just going to let go for a minute. We put our left palm upwards. And that left palm up is to Father Sky. And we put our right palm downwards to our person on our right. That right palm down is to Mother Earth. His other teachings are that our left palm up is to the ancestors. We're calling upon and calling down in the prayers to be amongst us as we work, play, interact. Our right palm down is to our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. When we join hands in that way, we're keeping the connections very, very strong. So I encourage you that if you're just on your own, you can just stand there and put your left palm up and your right palm down if you're on your own. So we'll do a blessing and a prayer to cover our time together today. Are you okay, Flo?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll say that blessing and a prayer. Haichka Osiam, Osiam. We're calling upon you, Creator, to bring your many, many blessings down upon this session today, down upon all the participants who are participating with us from afar. We ask, Creator, that you bless anyone who's away due to illness or other obligations. We ask, Creator, bless anyone who's yet to join, help them to join safely. We call upon you, Creator, to bring your blessings down upon our minds, our hearts, our bodies, our spirits. So when we think our thoughts, they are good, positive, and respectful. When we speak our words, they are good, positive, and respectful. We call upon you, Creator, to bless the people who prepare the food, bless the people who deliver the food, bless the food and drink we put in to nourish our bodies on our journeys to wellness and strength. We ask, Creator, that you bless all the shared teachings, all the shared learnings, all the shared interactions that will go on in our circle today. We kindly and respectfully ask you, Creator, to cover us each with your warm blanket of protection. Some of us as we travel through our educational lives, our professional lives, our family lives, and our lives in general. For those of us who have to travel far, help us to arrive safely. We give you many, many thanks, Creator, for always bringing your blessings down upon the hurting, the hungry, and the homeless, and especially the hurting, Creator. Haichka, Haichka Osiam, Osiam. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Melanie.
Haichka, Roberta. So amazing to have us start off this way. Thank you for those teachings.
We continue on. Okay. We're Elder Flo. Would you want to introduce yourself first?
Okay.
I want to thank you all for having me amongst you, and I'm very honored to have been invited to participate and share, and it's an honor to be beside my friend, because together we traveled a lot of the same ways, even though our beginnings weren't exactly the same date, but in the end we are on the same trail. And I'm so pleased that Roberta is able to touch and support so many people in all different areas, in the hospital, in the schools, and in a lot of other areas. She's quite a busy person. And she's been doing this for many years. And so I come from the Thompson and my dad's side of the family, and my mother's side is from the Shuswap. And I too was in residential school. Fortunately, my first 6 years I was born on a Spectrum Reserve and just across from Lytton. And so I spent my first 6 years on a farm where I was surrounded with family and mixed farming, and we all had cousins and aunties all around us, and a very traditional teachings in those years. So that's where I really basically was able to, I believe, know who I really am. So even though I had a lot of struggles, somehow we always managed. And and forgiveness was a part of, I was able to forgive the residential school experience when I began to learn the true history of our First Nations people. That's what brought me to, and I thank all the people, all the teachings, the people that guided me on this trail. And I know now what our true First Nations traditional ways were, very strong and family oriented. And we worked together well as a community in those days, and everyone was equal. And their gifts each person gave supported the whole community. And I'm a mother, a very proud mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. So those are the greatest gifts that have been given me. And I really am truly very so happy to be here. All my relations. I could see that.
It really is an honor to be here. Thank you for this invitation and to be in such great company. My name is David Tu. I'm from an immigrant settler family raised in Ontario, but I've been raising my family here on Coast Salish territory for the last 20 years. I'm a father of 2 beautiful boys. I've been a family doctor now for this is the 20th year of being a family doctor, and I'm going to wear 3 different hats today when I speak. Go through the slides. The first hat I'm going to wear is as a family doctor that's worked at the Vancouver Native Health Clinic, where I've had my family practice. And I've been there since 2002, so I guess 16 years as a family doctor there. I'm also going to speak a little bit as a UBC professor researcher about some of the work that we did in the downtown east side at Vancouver Native Health. And then I'm going to speak as a member of a health and healing cooperative called the Urban Indigenous Health and Healing Cooperative, and describe where we think we're going. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
So good morning, everyone, and I'd also like to thank you for the invitation to be here and to be with my great team as well. Thanks for being together again today. My name is Jennifer Dahoney. I'm a member of the Missinabbi First Nation, which is a Treaty 9 nation in Northern Ontario. I was born in Thunder Bay and grew up near Toronto. I'm also of mixed European ancestry, and I'm a physiotherapist by training, and I guess for the last 13 or so years now. And really my greatest teachings were when I became a student here at UBC on unceded Musqueam territory. I was welcomed into the Longhouse when I had enough courage to go inside and begin to work through my own identity and wrangle through what that meant, and met many women and many elders who have supported me on that journey. As my elder Roberta Price shares, when we call our ancestors to stand with us, we are then emboldened and encouraged to speak in a good way. So I hope to do that today, and to share the story of our work together and of supporting Indigenous people in their journey to wellness. So Miigwech, thank you.
So in terms of how I think I'd like to proceed is Jennifer and I are going to sort of share the PowerPoint pieces, but there's space anytime and every time that either Elder Flo or Elder Berta to contribute, and happy again to take questions from those out there wherever you are. And so I think we want to have this as a conversation. And I think this conversation is about the need for primary health care for Indigenous peoples. And the first thing is, well, why do we need to change the way we structure and the way we conduct ourselves in primary care? And we're going to talk a little bit about a model for primary care that is been front and center in a lot of discussions, called the patient medical home, and have a bit of a critical look at this model and can it actually work for the people that we're trying to take care of, and does it make enough space for cultural practices and Indigenous elders and healers to bring all their gifts to the people, and to really then try to hone in on the Truth and Reconciliation recommendation number 22. This is a call to action on actually what are the steps required to bring Indigenous healing practices to the people who are asking for them. So that's what we're hoping to do, and we'll come back to those three questions later. Jen, you want to?
Sure, yes. I also work with VCH and do some cultural safety trainings, and often in those circles I share that it's a privilege in 2018 to have been able to name the nation that I come from and to still have connections to family and territory, and that's a privilege that I do not share with many other Indigenous people of mixed ancestry or not. That our history was not set up in a way to allow that connection to be. We were set up to be erased, and we were set up to let go of culture and to extinguish it and to not have these. And so I acknowledge the privilege of being here today knowing that. And I also share that part of the reason why I am okay, why I am healthy, and why I am well is because of that connection. Mm-hmm. It has been maintained in my family. My mom was a residential school survivor, and she died when I was quite young, and I was therefore a product of a kinship adoption. The women in our family are leaders and are matriarchs, as is the way that we were pre-contact in our communities, the women-led, and I was taken in and taken care of, and I wasn't let go into a foster care system when I needed parents, and I wasn't taken. And so when I've sat in circles in the downtown east side with other women, I acknowledge that I was at risk in a time in my life, and I was very privileged and lucky to be held on to. And many of our elders have recovered from the fact that that was not their story. And so their work and their resilience and their strength is what we bring forward in our work. And so to highlight this idea that health and wellness is actually reinforced, like this quote says, by our sense of cultural identity. There's a huge movement, there's amazing people across Canada right now who are all working in the same area of providing opportunities of reclaiming ancestry, reclaiming songs and dances, teaching, ceremonies, the ability to sit together in this way and to have ceremony. This was criminalized a short few decades ago, and I acknowledge that this reclaiming is sort of the root of our work. And UNDRIP, so the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, basically says we have the right to do this, right? And not only personally, quietly in our own home situations, but we have a right to do this within our political, our social, our health, our government institutions. And so it's really encouraging now to see the health industry, the healthcare system making space for this. And that's the work we're really trying to highlight today, was there is an ability to bring both. There's an ability to pick up Western medical practices and have that benefit people, and there's also the ability to pick up the teachings. I often don't want to speak after you've spoken, because I think that your introduction is everything. It is all of what we're talking about. But that's what we're trying to share a story of today, is the merging of two, and that it can be done in partnership, it can be done in a respectful way, and really it is in response to what Indigenous people have been asking for and fighting for decades now. And really we're just trying to make space to do more of that.
Thank you, Jen. And so I'm going to wear the hat of a family doctor, who's been very much connected to a specific community in Vancouver. And this is just, these images that you're seeing are just what Google, when you say Google images downtown East Side, this is the page that comes up. And so there are many faces. It's a really diverse community. There's about 16,000 or so people in sort of an 8-block-ish radius. We know for the city of Vancouver that there's about 14,000 Indigenous people identified in the last census, which works out to about 1 in 50 people living in the city of Vancouver. But within this smaller community, it's about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 people living in that community will identify themselves as Indigenous. And that's probably an underestimation, because we know how census data work. But I just say I had to do a home visit for someone yesterday at the end of the day who wasn't able to come in, so I walked over. And on that short walk, which was really in 4 blocks, I had 5 conversations with people that I know, some patients, some people who are just other people being active in the community, all residents, all of whom happen to be Indigenous on this short walk. And it was just a contrast to when I walked down the home that I live in Kitsilano. I don't talk to anybody. There is a village phenomena there where people know and understand each other, and so there's many strengths that come from that community. And there's long stretching relationships, and I'm privileged to have patients that I knew 15 years ago who are now parents or grandparents, and it's a real place of privilege. But it's also a place where where you can see the results of what history has brought to Indigenous people in Canada, and it really is people from all over Turtle Island making home in the downtown East Side, and you can measure things like twice the rate of HIV infection, 2 or 3 times the rate of hepatitis C infection. Many fold times, as researchers say, 6 times the rate of depression, much higher rates of suicide, chronic diseases, COPD, all these things you can measure, and there's no, and I think it's important. It's important to acknowledge that those disparities exist, and those are the things actually that we can use as a tool to say we'll know where we're getting it right when we no longer see those things. And so that's the positive reason why to keep on mentioning these numbers, and to understand where they fit in historically, why they're there, and that sort of guides what the response should look like. And I'll say that from my own perspective of being a sort of a Western trained family doctor, doing the work that I was trained to do, trying to do it in the best way that I could within the Vancouver Native Health Clinic, which was kind of trying everything that they could within that sort of Western medical model to be the best. It was clearly not a sufficient response in terms of making impacts to address those disparities. And after a while, you start to realize, well, if we keep on doing the same thing, we're going to get the same result, and that's madness. And so this is where unfortunately, we're offset because we went from a Mac to a PC. So,
It's okay on this one. I'll let you on this one.
oh, okay, well, good. This is where I'm going to switch over and put on the hat of a UBC researcher, and so privileged to be able to do research in the same place where I work. And I'm going to acknowledge the role that Vancouver Native Health played in terms of it was an environment that was ready at that time to look at making some changes, and there was a welcoming of trying to do something different. And as a researcher, we thought, okay, we're going to try and look to measure things. And the reason why we're measuring was not to was really to try and be where we're at now, where we can advocate for change with some outcomes that we thought we were hoping to be persuasive. I think all of us from the outset knew that this was really a no-brainer. It was obvious that this is what people are asking for and that this would be beneficial to do. But nevertheless, there was no evidence that we thought that people who were going to make funding decisions, ministry decisions, would be persuaded by. So we went ahead and did that. And so how we looked at things was we structured this is the I guess the concept of really placing the person that we're caring for in the center of everything we're doing, and that's why that there's a picture of a person sitting in the middle, and acknowledging that there are multiple aspects to each person. And we use the medicine. We borrowed the medicine wheel in part to as a signifier of Indigenous culture, which, as a symbol that's recognized across many nations, but also just in the wisdom of that. Acknowledging that there's a physical, mental, emotional, spiritual components, and these things all need to be included when looking at the care of an individual. And we recognize that the primary care team, and in this experimental sense, was composed of nurses, physicians, counselors, and a great support staff, really trying to wrap around. And really, our area of expertise is around sort of the physical aspects and some of the sort of cognitive, mental aspects. And we were privileged to be able to have a counter team of a psychiatrist, mental health counselors, outreach workers, who could wrap around and bring expertise to the emotional as well as the cognitive side of things. And then we were able to bring in this team of beautiful elders. Initially, just 2 elders.
Yes.
But the team grew, and I think we had sort of over the course of this research, we had 5 elders making up this team. And so this whole idea of that you could have a person walk in the front door, maybe with a health issue, maybe with a crisis, whoever they touched first, and maybe it was a doctor or a nurse that they touched first, they could get what they needed from that person, and then be able to be handed over to maybe a counselor, or maybe set up some input from a psychiatrist, and then in that same sort of gentle way be able to connect that person to a teaching circle, an elder to meet with them one-on-one, be part of a ceremony that was going to bring them out for the solstice. That was the experience that we wanted people coming into the center to have, and that's sort of the model of which we base things. And what we kind of realized, we needed 4 things to make this actually work, and those 4 things are having the same, everyone, all in those 3 teams having the same goals, a shared respect, a shared sense of communication, and a shared sense of understanding. And we're gonna come back to this model in a little bit, but and I'm gonna say that all 4 of those things during the course of putting this program together were hard fought. None of those things came automatically, with the exception maybe of having the same. Everyone wanted the best for the patient. And so that's probably where we began, that everyone wanted the patient to be on a better path, and was willing to make changes to see that happen. So just continuing on maybe on the research vein, and then Jen and I are going to kind of pass back and forth here. We did two types of research. The first was just actually looking at, well, how do you create this partnership model within sort of a primary care clinic? And so we asked some questions, like how is this program changing the way patients receive care? How are elders and clinic staff kind of experiencing this process? And what does it mean for an organization to make this change? And so what we did is we basically asked people to share us their story. So we collected 16 interviews. The transcripts were many pages long each. And then we analyzed those by our research group using sort of relatively standard qualitative methods, but really we made sure that each transcript was analyzed both from an Indigenous and non-Indigenous perspective. We tried to have a gender balance as well as a profession balance. And this is what we found. Is that bringing elders into a primary care space brings something new, a new experience for the people using that space. And for the first time, there was really the sense that spiritual care was being addressed. And a new sense of time. Like, I think people are used to the pace of a clinic. You hurry up and you wait to see somebody, and then you're hurried through the process because there's so many people and there's not enough time or there's not enough service. And really the way that our team of elders used time was very different from the way that it had been used previously. Really just taking the time and giving people that time and space. We saw relationships change and the perception of what coming into this primary care center was like, mostly by sort of weekly participation in teaching circles that became more of a place where they belonged, and that there was a sense of purpose growing from participating and attending. And probably the thing that strikes me most from, one of the things that hit my heart most was just that, and it was the first time that I've ever sort of had a personal relationship with an elder and felt that mentorship. And some of the things that you described with elder flow, I think I've experienced to extent through what we're doing, is just to learn through relationship, through being invited and then taking the time to participate in ceremony. That results in changes to the way one practices medicine. And overall, the sort of the organizational culture, we saw there being space made for changing or indigenizing. This is just two quick quotes. That this is from one of the physicians. The way I was trained around Aboriginal health in medical school was horrendous. I need to undo that teaching. And that the experience of working with elders has opened new doors with patients, doors that did not open from taking the cultural competency course. And so that was sort of while things were kind of gearing up, and then we shifted into saying, okay, we're going to see, is this actually effective? And to do that, the nature of the funding we had was to look at mental health and suicide prevention in particular. And we wanted to see if this model of care was having an impact. And so we took a group of 45 individuals and we looked at them forward over the next 12 months. And we measured at the beginning when they first met a number of questions around their mental and emotional health and their social circumstance, and then repeated those same things at 3 months and 6 months. We also, at 3 months, invited all those that had connected with an elder to share their story. And last roughly over sort of the 12 months before and the 12 months after, we looked at how often people had crises that brought them to the emergency room, and specifically looking at the number of mental health related visits and that were categorized as being on the lower end of urgencies according to what the emergency room felt. So as I mentioned, there were 45 people who provided their written consent to participate. Most were women. Most were, the average person was 49 years old, and about a third had attended residential or Indian day school. About 2/3 had direct experience with the foster care system. Slightly less than half were from British Columbia, and there was a wide diversity of nations that people originated from or were connected to, and those are listed there.
I noticed more women. Does that reflect your clientele overall?
It was the opposite actually.
Yeah. In the neighborhood, about 2/3 of the neighborhood are men. About 2/3 of the patients that were coming into the health center were Indigenous, and about half of those people who identified as Indigenous were women. So, but still certainly a minority, but yeah, a real flip in terms of what you'd expect to see. So just really quickly, the results and numbers, people, we connected to people and held that connection well, so 91% retention. The average person connected with an elder 5 times over the course of the 6 months that we were observing. And we saw significant statistically and clinically meaningful decreases in depression, suicide risk, and emergency room visits. And this is all, this data has been accepted for publication in Canadian Family Physician, and the reference is there. The date of publication isn't firmly set, but within the next month or two is what the editor is. That's what I'm hoping the editor is going to do. And these are just the graphs showing that same measure of depression symptoms coming down after connecting with an elder and staying down over a 6-month period. These are and this kind of response is what someone who treats depression would find that's a meaningful response. Similar for suicide risk, and and this is the drop sort of before and after in terms of emergency room visits. So a significant reduction in overall emergency room visits, but a more focused and greater reduction in mental health related visits. So less crises.
Okay. Is that me?
That's you.
I should honor too that the elders that did this work, so Elder Bonnie Hanus, Elder Bruce Robinson, Elder Mardar Rowe, Elder Fred John, Elder Eugene Harry, Elder Roberta Price, and Elder Doris Paul had been with us previously. So I think we knew, as Indigenous people, we knew that this worked. And what we didn't expect, though, was that the numbers would show in a scientific study. That wasn't something I think we were prepared to see. We knew the stories would be powerful, but we weren't expecting those changes in graphs and in numbers. So that is data that we're proud to bring back to the health authorities in saying, okay, we have some data, we've shown some evidence that this works. You didn't want to listen to Indigenous people telling you that it works, but here's some scientific data. Can you please support this in a very meaningful way? And our leaders in the health system are continuing to advocate and try to make that change. Okay, so I get to share the stories, which is always the loveliest part of this. So we're holding and carrying the stories of 38 participants. Our research assistant at the time she was very stressed out about doing this research and doing it well in the community, and she understood the burden of research that's been done, and she kept coming to me and saying, how are we going to make sure? And I said, how you do this is how it's going to be good research. So it is up to you. You need to have good relationships with people. You need to be respectful of their stories. You need to have a connection and to take care of them while you're doing this. And if we do that well, then we can be proud of it. And if you don't do that well, then you're right, this is going to be another legacy of bad research. So Zara did a beautiful job, and Drs. George Hadjipavlu, Dr. Colleen Varco, and Dr. Annette Brown, and Elder Roberta Price, they were the steering group of investigators that led this and said that this was okay to do. And so I'll share some of the stories with you. So 5 major themes came out of this research. Pages and pages of interview transcripts. So probably thousands of pages actually of people's stories around what this experience had meant to them. And 5 themes were common amongst them. The first one was that people found that seeing an elder or a knowledge keeper or a healer was like finding a place of healing after a prolonged period of seeking and desperation. And people often said in their interviews that they were sort of at the end of their line. They didn't know where to turn to any longer. They had tried to access help multiple times. It hadn't worked, and they were coming to the elders in this place of extreme desperation. And one person said, it's calmed me down. That's exactly what it is. It's a calming effect that they have on me. Basically, it's medicine that I needed, and I know I needed, so when I really have issues or I'm feeling blue, it makes me happy to see them. The second aspect was this idea of strengthening cultural identity and belongingness, and this makes sense. So the elders provided a weekly cultural teaching circle. It gave people a chance to come together in a social situation that was safe, that was warm, that was positive, that was fun, and to do things around having a sense of Indigenous identity. So canning traditional foods, canning salmon together, canning berries together, making button blanket wall hangings, harvesting cedar and then making wreaths at Christmas time so that people had an ability to give gifts to their loved ones. This was sort of the cornerstone of people's week. It became the safe place for people to come to. As well, obviously, in the one-to-one visits, identity was strengthened through this model of care, of being kin, of mentoring, of supporting and encouraging and deeply listening to people for hours, if that's what it took. And so people told us that this had strengthened their sense of identity and therefore their resilience, really. And the third theme here was this idea of developing trust and opening up. And this is huge. So many Indigenous people, our Indigenous scholars have written about this for years around the system not being safe for Indigenous people. So we know this. We know this through the terrible history of the Indian residential schools, of Indian hospitals, of the 60s scoop, of the millennial scoop. Indigenous people are not mistrustful because we are inherently mistrustful. There are reasons why. And so people bring that when they enter a system. I share the story often of, it was probably through this process where I started reflecting on being a child and sitting in a dentist chair, and I argued with the dentist. He wanted to take out 4 of my teeth. They were impacted. They were going to cause me problems, and he was right, they did. But I said no. And I said to him, you only want to take my teeth out because you will make more money if you do so. And so I declined that treatment, and a decade later I had a problem, as he said I would. But the nature of me fighting as a 9 or 10-year-old with a dentist was I didn't trust him. I didn't inherently think that what he was going to do was going to be in my best interests. I thought it would be in his best interests. And in reflecting on that, I realized that wasn't me. I was not born with that mistrust. That was a legacy of what my family had been through in these systems. And they had told me, you don't trust. And I had taken that on. And so when people come to us and they don't trust and they say no to various aspects of healthcare, it's not that they're being resistant or non-compliant. It's that there is no safety there. And this group worked really hard with people around developing trust and safety. And sometimes that took a short period of time, and sometimes it might take a year or two, but when the trust is there, people open up and they can actually access services that can help them. So this was really huge. This other theme is fairly heartbreaking, but it's this idea of coping with losses. Almost everyone has had significant losses in their life, from childhood through to adulthood. Losses of family members, losses of connection, losses of just people that you cannot live without. And many people, this is their story. And the elders gave them a way to begin coping with the loss, coping with the grief in adaptive ways, so in healing ways. This was actually pre the opioid crisis, so that obviously heightened the amount of loss that's happening in this community, but this was a very safe way of people learning for the first time how to hold grief and do it in a connected way with the proper supports. And then very lastly, this idea of engaging in ceremony as a spiritual dimension of care was a resource for hope. And hope, we know, is how we keep people going, right? When we don't have hope, we lose people when there is no hope. So participating in ceremony and this spiritual aspect of care was hugely important. In this process of learning to work together, I know we're good friends, but we've had several arguments about trying to understand this model, and I kept saying, we're not doing Indigenous health just because we're treating Indigenous people. We're going to be doing Indigenous health when we make space for Indigenous knowledge and Indigenous wisdom to be the leading voice in what's happening in this system. And so by bringing in ceremony and actually accessing the spiritual side of people's care, we were beginning to do this, which is what the elders brought in. So ultimately, at the time we were doing this, it was 2013, 2014. The TRC hadn't released its report yet. It was amazing when they did, and the Call to Action 22, we can say that this work really was bringing that call to life. It was not, it was actually about trying to do this and kind of getting in the trenches together and trying to figure out how this could be possible. It wasn't talking about whether or not it may or may not be possible. There are a million barriers to doing this work, and this team was really about, let's try this and let's make mistakes and let's continue to grow together until we get to the point where we're highly functioning and doing this work in a good way. So this evidence really is supporting this action, that it is possible.
I guess I'll just mention that all those transcripts that were up on the screen there were just published 2 weeks ago
yes.
in the Canadian Medical Association Journal on May the 22nd. I think that's included on the slides there.
Thanks.
No one else. A lot of people work really hard.
I forget about that whole
If you're interested, it's there. So just now thinking about, so just reflecting then on this experience, I had this picture here of where things began was a team, a high functioning, effective team at the Vancouver Native Health Clinic delivering primary care in the way that they were trained to do primary care. And so again, as a sort of a researcher trying to analyze this, and that's, again, this is only my voice, not representing that of anyone else at this point, really, is that there was space made to have a group of elders come and share and partner in this experience. And when I look back and say, well, how much space were we given to elders? How much time? How much human resources? How much money? It worked out to about a 10% to 90% ratio of what was happening over the time of this research. And then if you think, okay, well, where do we want to go? And this is, again, cultural appropriation from an Asian culture, and so it's just simple that actually means a fair bit to sort of one half of my family. But I think it represents the balance that we're actually trying to look for here. is to try and shift that and see if we can make that work. And that's kind of when we presented these same findings back to the people who participated. So we invited everyone who shared their story or participated to come to a feast and hear the results. And they said, one of the things they said, yes, this was helpful. We agree with these results. You need to do more. It needs to there needs to be a greater presence. And so there's been a coming together of a group of us, many who were deeply connected to this research, who formed a cooperative. So it was just last fall that we became a legal entity as the Urban Indigenous Health and Healing Cooperative, and we have a board of 7 people, 4 of whom are Indigenous elders recognized by the downtown East Side community. We have basically a goal or a mandate to try and bring that sort of balanced picture of delivery of primary care elder-led services to the community. And I'm going to maybe thank Elder Latasha of the Squamish Nation for designing our logo. And Elder Latasha out there, we could really do with a better name. we picked this name to appeal to funders, is what we needed to do.
It's a holding place of a name.
Yes.
And at some point we hope to be gifted a name someday when we've earned it.
So we are in the process of creating this new health and healing center, and although we were committed by the participants in this research to keep this service in the downtown East Side community, and that was the same clear voice from all the elders who are advising us, is that this needs to be here first and foremost. It needs probably to be many places, but there's no question that it needs to be here for this neighborhood, who are often disconnected from their own lands and traditions. So we are so happy to be able to say that we've leased a property through the City of Vancouver at the base of a beautiful building run by Rin City Housing that houses a large number of Indigenous families, so women-led families and children living in this building above. Big, wide open space for us, and we're going to try and make it space for 2,000 members of the community to come. And we knew we wanted to do this sort of team-based with elders and healers, as Jen described, kind of leading the process. So not just a clinic that's trying to encourage Indigenous people to come in, but actually a Indigenous-led service of primary care. And so bringing a team together and acknowledging the importance of a space for a community to gather, the important role of food and food security, and assistance with medicines and management of medicines broadly writ large, so including Western and traditional medicines. And to be a hub for research and education, and to focus on people across the life spectrum, from children to youth, adults, and older adults. So now we're at the point of, and this is why we delayed the invitation to come speak, is we're still figuring this out. So I didn't want to come talk to you a few months ago because we're still looking. So one of the places that we've looked to is there has been a coming together of the First Nations Aboriginal Primary Care Network here in Vancouver, which has brought together the 3 on-reserve primary care services, as well as Anya, Luma, and Urban Native Youth Association have all come together. And I've been a part of that process through my connection with Luma. To try and develop what are the principles of how we want to do care. And one of the things, and they a very well written document, which I think echoes the the philosophy of care that we want to bring forward, put together. But this is sort of the guiding principles, and what I really resonated on was just actually putting culture at the center. We're used to seeing pictures of people, but that recognition that culture is a part of everything that happens. And we know we have this sort of partnership model that we're working with. And so how do we bring this model and sort of broader principles together? And how do we do this in a way that kind of works with what the Minister of Health and the GP Service Committee and many other districts across the world now are looking as a way to improve the way we do provide primary care. So that's why we put the name Patient Medical Home in the title of this talk, because it is talked about a lot, and it's been proposed as a way to get the best out of what primary care can be, and it's an aspiration type model that I don't think it's something that all primary care clinics now are being called upon to work towards. And it's ambitious. It's an ambitious goal, and it has showed great results. It has showed very good, promising results in many districts. And I think the things, just to kind of dissect this model, there's one goal and 12 attributes. And the one goal is, again, to have overall whole person care be improved, so that the quality of that, so there's obviously synergies there. And then they have this inner circle of green, where they look at, these are the attributes of the actual care, that there is a commitment, a strong relationship between a clear provider and a person seeking care, that there's the ability to access sort of 24/7, 7 days a week is present, that all the services that a person needs is made available, that it's continuous, it's not a one-off thing, people are there for the long haul, and that it's well coordinated within a team. And then you have you have your outer circle, which is they call it the relational enablers. And so acknowledging that a team-based care is a better way to deliver care, that if you then get teams of teams working together, you're going to get some synergies, and if you get some organization of those teams of teams, things will likely work better. And if you embed in there a good information system for people to work with, education and training and research to bring new ideas and fresh eyes, always thinking about improving the quality in terms of how you do things, and adequate supports, so have it be well funded, is kind of the ingredients to make this successful. So this has been tried, but not in the context of what we've just been talking about. So reflecting on this, and this is just drafts, and this is just ideas, and so I'm just overlaying things on top of an existing model here. So, but taking that idea that culture is at the center, and that it's actually, it's supporting the cultural identity of the person at the center, and that would ring true of whatever culture of people that I think you're working with, regardless of wherever people are from. And then to put in the center of that team, that network of elders. So clear that they are part of the team, but keeping them central, that there's space for people like me who are trained to be a family doctor, to bring my skills to the table, but that there is this space, and the leading edge is a space for people like Elder Roberta to bring her gifts and skills forward, along with a much broader team connected to that. And then it's a matter of getting those same things to happen, getting everyone to have an understanding of if you bring a team together, a well-functioning team understands each other and who they are as people, but as well as what skills and when they can be useful, when they're not useful. Having that same goal, creating a working environment that has the utmost level of respect, and modeling that for the people who are receiving care and being able to communicate effectively. So this is our idea of how to take this model, which has been again a great group of researchers out of Seattle kind of developing this model, but how to grow with it. Jen, you wanna?
Sure, okay. I get to talk a little bit about the how to do that. Yes. This is gonna sound cliche a little and overly simplistic, but around a table and with lots of cups of tea and to slow down. And really the elders said that at the beginning, that we needed to come together, and we needed to come together regularly, and we needed to get off email to build the relationships. So we did back when we began. It was a weekly Thursday afternoon. People gave up their lunch hours, and we spent an hour to an hour and a half together, probably for a year, trying to figure each other out and trying to figure out what is it. It was pretty much, I don't think there were any Indigenous healthcare providers there. So it was all non-Indigenous healthcare providers now attempting to work with a group of elders whom no one had a relationship. And so that needed to be created. And the funniest part of this was because I kind of walk in both worlds a little bit, having been trained in a Western system and then having teachings from my family. I would sit with the elders afterwards and they'd say to me, "What did they say?" And I would translate. This is where they were going. The doctors would say, they told that really beautiful story. What was I supposed to get? Like, what were they saying? And so I translated that. And then eventually over time, I stopped doing that because they just had this relationship of Elder Roberta would speak and David would understand, okay, this is what I need to do, and vice versa. Oh, we're going to do research. Okay, how do we do that? So it was really interesting process, but really it was around making relationships, making strong connections. And that gave us the ability to make mistakes and then forgive each other and have the grace to continue to move forward. And there's enough barriers around this to never do this work, right? Like there's enough fear around really kind of shallow sound bites get thrown out all the time around the Western team's going to appropriate the Indigenous team's knowledge. Okay, well let's dig into that a little bit. Is that what's happening? Are the doctors trying to run ceremony and trying to do this? No, they're not. Okay, we can put that concern aside. Okay, how do we have the elders doing this system in a really litigious system? Are they going to get sued? How do we work around supporting them that they're safe, that they are not liable? How do we do that? Okay, we can figure out how to do that. Put that aside. So there was all sorts of reasons to not do this, and really it kept coming back to the table, and we talk about, this is stressing me out, or I don't know how to work through this, and the elders kept with it, and the doctors and nurses kept with it till we got to this point of being a functioning team. Does that about kind of describe it? And do you share some?
And if I could share too, and please add what you feel in Elder Flow, that I feel, if I can look back over the years, that it was really two worlds colliding, and both worlds thinking that it was okay to meet and that everything would go smoothly on the road ahead. And that it was a lot of regrouping, rethinking, bringing in the patients and patients of mind, heart, and spirit, and that really listening and as I have always done when the elders speak, I would never say a word. I would sit and listen to what is being said till they finished. So there's a lot of teaching out in the world that when the elders speak, that people need to stop, listen, and take it in, and not interrupt the elder when they're speaking. And I think it's those teachings coming down through many, many generations of respect. And that is, like I say many, many times out there, if we welcome back the ceremony into all of our worlds, into our families, into our workplaces, into everything that we do, if we welcome back the ceremony of the past times, as Flo mentioned, before, when we were, the experiences of both of us before we were 6 years old, and taken away. That it was all happy, healthy, loving, respectful most of all. That the respect was there in every single aspect of our life. So welcoming back ceremony, welcoming back respect, and that's not an easy thing when this world has been so modernized and people are conditioned to, society is conditioned. I'm not saying it's every single individual, but it's society has been conditioned to rush. My thought is better than your thought, so I'm going to interrupt you and override you. That respect, we need to bring back that respect, we need to bring back that ceremony. And I'd love to hear some input from you, Flo, around respect.
Thank you. And thank you, Roberta. And let's see. Yes, the group teaching, like community teachings, is what the strength, and a community also can be a community in your workplace, in any workplace. It doesn't have to be just in the First Nations immediate community. So, for example, when there's a family issue, we used to get together as mothers and fathers, grandparents, cousins, aunties, and if there's a chief or whatever, or of course in those days we didn't have our own schooling system years ago. This is before European contact, but our schooling system was on a daily basis. Teachings from our elders and from our older aunties and uncles who guided the children, and they observed the children, and they guided the children in whatever those children's gifts were. They didn't try and guide a child into an area he wasn't gifted for. So I really truly believe when that happened, when they were guiding the child in their gifted area, when they became stronger and stronger and were able to really have a sound, positive self-image, then they would have the strength to work on the areas that weren't so easy for them, or and they would be able to succeed in a more positive area rather than always just being negative about the negative. So that the teachings too is everyone was included, everybody had a voice in a circle, and you didn't interrupt the person that had the eagle feather, or some people had a vow, and there's other teachings from other different territories. So the person was able to be heard and also to respect their views, and then work together on a common goal. For example, when you're in a community circle and the issue was the care of the child, then that was the one strong commonality that you had amongst you. You all agreed, you all loved this child. And that child was fortunate to have such a large circle of relatives and support from the community. And sometimes these circles took hours. So if the circle had to be closed because it's 4:30 and you were off duty, when you came back the next day, that circle is not the same. So in our traditional ways, you stayed until everyone had their say, and agreement was come to for the responsibilities of each person for the future for that child. And I think because the patience that our people were really exhibiting, the patience and respect is what the real strength was in order to help that family and that child. And that's just an example in one area. It could be medical, it could be a lot of different teachings and help that that person needs. And I want to thank you for allowing me to be here and to share all my relations.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we do have a question here, and we've got about 15 minutes left. So was there ever a time when you had a negative response to your care and teachings, and how did you handle it?
Is that for us elders or for us as a team? We could answer them both
Probably, yeah.
perspectives.
Both perspectives would be good.
So if I could answer as elder in that regard, and then I can turn it over to our other team members, that as I share with many, it isn't everybody walking down the street that I hold to account for what happened to me and my relatives and many of our relatives across country. It isn't, so it is the federal government. The federal government, its laws and its policies entrenched in the Constitution and the Indian Act. And so I do come across many people in many different, as Elder Flo said, I work in the schools, I work in the hospitals, I work in the community, I work in many different places. And what I have faced for many years is the anger of my people, my relatives, is that anger, because we have been taught, because it was against the law for us to practice, to do ceremonies, to do what we believed in. So there's a lot of conflict inside about, am I wrong if I deal with ceremony, or am I wrong if I have anything to do with my culture? And so when as a team, it's recommended for the patients to come and see us elders, and then it's up to the patients to see whether they want to see a woman elder. And then when we received the wonderful gifts of Elder Bruce Robinson and Elder Fred John, they had the choice to see a woman or a man. And when they chose us women, it was we had to sit, us elders had to sit and be patient around their personal inner conflict about, should I talk about, like as we said back in the old days, should I talk about my Indianness? Do I have a right to do that? So just working through all of that part, letting the anger come out, letting the frustration come out. And that's what I think I have that gift, to sit with many people. If they're really angry, I just sit and listen to them. When, like, I almost say, like, are you finished now? If you're finished letting all of that anger out, then we can start to work together. So I think that, that for many patients in the hospital, or people in the community, or people in the schools, whether they're the children, the parents, or the grandparents, have this inner conflict about, do I have a right? Do I have a right to be me? Do I have a right to sit with the elder and listen to whatever the elder's teachings are? So yes, I hope that would answer that question in regards. I deal with a lot of that, but I have been through that, my journey myself, about that inner conflict. So as my older brother says, only the people who've gone through the experience can truly comfort the people who are going through it today. So I think that's why many of us elders can sit and listen and patiently wait, and then we go forward after that. But don't suppress the anger. Don't tell people you cannot be angry. You let those feelings come out, and when those feelings are released, then we can work forward from then on. So I hope that answers respectfully the question that's been put forward, and I'll turn it over to...
Maybe I'll just put a comment on, as I can think of a few people who, again, the conversation comes up, they're in a circumstance that's impacting them, and says, well, would you like to connect with an elder? And at times it's like, no, that's the last thing I want to do. I've had a bad experience. I don't identify with that. It's not what I want. Don't bring that up again. And so that was, this was, when we were doing this research, that was a relatively new experience. To be able to offer that and to have that conversation was one thing. So learning things about the people you're working with. But, there's a couple of instances that really sticks out. But those same people, 6 months, 12 months later, then there's actually, there's an openness. It's like there are at different times I can see that a window open that actually they are interested. There was an interest in exploring, and so it is like anything. I've gotten the same response when I say, well, would you like to connect with a psychiatrist? Would you like to go to the hospital for that? So again, and there is a moment. There are times where people are receptive and open, is my experience, and times when they are not. And that same person doesn't hold static. That to be able to reoffer again in a respectful way. And I can think of another person who did connect with an elder and then had some quite very difficult things happen in her life, and then was just bitter at everything. And there was bitterness, that I remember her saying to me, it was, the elder made it sound like it was going to be so easy, and it's not easy. It's not just do this. And then that was a phase that she kind of went through where she was very angry for a while, and then she became less angry, and then realized that it's actually her craft work, her beating that grounds her, and she came back to that. So it's mixed experience. It's not a one-way street. It is more complicated and messy, and I think the messiness is something to acknowledge.
So they say, Haichika.
Oh. The answer. Thank you. Okay, so just thank you for the stories, for those teachings, both of you. So basically the processes of doing this was getting together weekly, being around a table, learning to listen to one another, and then starting to have the hard conversations around what does the team do if X. And those harder conversations could be had once the trust was in place. The work was supported by advisory committees, so a community advisory committee and an elders advisory committee that met 2 to 4 times a year, who listened to what was happening and then gave guidance. They were also there for us to call in the in-between meeting times. We could email or call for help. We knew to do that. We knew to go. We asked people in Alaska, in Toronto, in Ottawa, how do you do this work? How do we move forward when we got stuck? So we definitely were humble in knowing that we were doing something that we didn't necessarily know how to do. So we asked for help. One of the other ways we learned to work together was this idea of shared communication. So we were all on the same electronic medical record, or EMR, so the elders put in their notes. The doctors and nurses learned a lot by seeing what the elder would write. They were seeing someone for something, and then the elder would be seeing someone, and often the story would blow wide open. It was obviously all done in a confidential way, but the depth of the work of the elders in terms of sharing around emotional and spiritual and family health connectedness was suddenly brought onto this record. Or not much of a note at all, and the elder could just write emceeing or discussing ceremony, for example. So the elder had sort of freedom to chart as they wished. And then this idea of seasonal ceremony as getting back to land a couple times a year. If we had the budget for it, we'd come up to Musqueam territory at UBC Farm and do ceremony together, and in a way to ground the team and to continue to have the Indigenous teachings begin to lead what was happening. So that was sort of the how and that we began to work together. I think we're at the end.
This is just the fact that the advisory committee and having sort of an even power spread, I think, is important in terms of trying to structure things.
So is it opened yet, or is it still
Well, sorry. Is it? I think then, are we open for questions?
No.
We're open. We're aiming for the fall. We're in the beginning of renovation of this space.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I've had people on the island actually ask for the phone number. My family is there, and I'm like, not yet.
If anyone's working in the city permitting office, you can speed up the process.
So do we want to open for questions?
Yeah, sure. Any comments or questions of thoughts people have around the model, or suggestions too, or questions? We've just got a just a little bit of time. If folks have to run off, that's okay, but maybe we'll go over just a little bit. We'll see if anything comes in. I know for myself, I'm very excited to see this model and how even just putting people in the client or the patient in the middle and having the services wrap around and having the cultural and elder pieces not be like an add-on but be integrated into the model is such an important thing. So
we shared this canoe metaphor at the beginning when we were deciding on how to work together. There was the option of, do we have the elders canoe and the primary care canoe? We're all in the same river going in the same direction, but keep it really separate and is that the way we want to work, or are we all in the same canoe? And that was a decision for the team, and I don't know that that's necessarily the decision for I would say every team would need to decide that. Like, do you want to get in and paddle together and really integrate the care, or is it okay to be under the same roof doing two very separate things? So I think each situation, each location, each team would need to make that decision. And the elders really defined that for us and said, nope, it's going to be messier, but let's all get in and go in the same direction. Paddle together. Yeah.
that's great. We'll have to have you back when it's been running for a while and see how things are going.
And I just want to add too, and I think it's been our journey together to come together as a very, very strong team. Like I said, it was two worlds colliding, that there's a lot of patience showed on both sides. But I think that through all of that growth, that you can come to a shared understanding and shared respect of each other, and that that now, I think because we have gone through all of that over the years, that, the way we have it set up now is that we all do the work and everybody has their gifts of the work they're going to do, but nothing moves forward without the full approval of every elder that is involved. And I think that is really returning back to what Elder Flo and I said, is returning back to the ways that we were once, like to hold the elders up in the highest regard and to listen and not interrupt and to listen until they're finished speaking. And I think that we have that model, and I really, really appreciate it feels a little bit funny being Indigenous and having the experiences of racism throughout our entire lives, that we're actually feel like we're on a pedestal and we're so that's a little sometimes a little bit unsettling too, but it's really a wonderful feeling actually when each and every one of us elders are called upon. Do you all agree with this? And then we all agree. And, and I think that's a really, would love for many, many other organizations, not just in healthcare, but in all the organizations that give service to all of our people to adopt that model. So, Hajka Siam. Thank you.
And there's, so thank you for sharing your journeys and learnings. And are you able to share the PowerPoint with us? So we can post that on our website after, and those that are registered will get the link as well when that's up. And someone else here, very interesting, thank you for sharing. Where's the best forum to hear about progress in the future? Just check the UIHHC website.
Probably,
yeah.
We'll try to do a good job at keeping up to date and inviting people to come join us. We do try to do a number of community gatherings and bring people together to share learnings. I mean, and that comes back to one of our teachings of when you have something that works, you share. And we've been mentored, and we continue to try to do that when people come to us with questions as well.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions, so wondering if any of you have any closing words.
Maybe we'll go each say something, starting with you, Jen. Say your name again and maybe a positive word or a positive thought in going forward in our journey.
Jennifer Dahoney, I'm honored to be here, and just great hope for the future.
Good to see you.
David too, and I just thank you, Haichika Wasim. Many people that helped this work to happen. The people who did the work, the research staff, the elders, the staff at Native Health, the people who funded it. This work, the Community Action Initiative, CIHR, Vancouver Coastal Health, and Vancouver Native Health Society. Just deep gratitude to all those people.
I'd like to thank everyone that has been involved in this, I'd say, new adventure, in the sense that we are in this modern society and we're balancing something from the past in order to honor our people and be respectful. And respect has been always the strong teachings of our elders years ago, because we were always told, even if you don't agree with someone, for whatever reason, just respect their beliefs and their ways, but don't expect everyone to always agree with you, but learn how to come to a balance together whenever possible, and then always have another goal to always reach for a higher space of peace and harmony. And I think that's like here, it didn't happen overnight.
Yes.
It took a long time to reach this state, and it's wonderful to have this stepping stone, and hopefully this will help guide other nations to join in this as well. I'd like to thank all of you and all the elders that are not sitting here right now, that were very strong in their support and their patience and the willingness to share and persevere all my relations.
Coast Salish Elder Roberta Price. I want to really raise my hands up high to all of our team, all of our elders who worked really hard to hold our teams together. I want to raise my hands up to you, Elder Doris Paul, who started with me in this journey, and then our other elders joined us. And I really want to hold my hands up high to actually the community members that we have continued to serve, and that you are the ones that are guiding the path of this team and how we're going to go forward. And I especially want to honor the teachings of my elders around our two-spirited people, that the two-spirited people, we hold you in the highest respect, and that we work towards that goal of bringing back that ceremony of respect for our people. So I really want to hold my hands up to the Learning Circle here at UBC, to Melanie, Haichika, it's lovely to be with you again, and to Davina for not on screen, but holding it all together for us in a really good and technical way. So I'll hand it to you, Melanie.
So Haichika, Melanie Rivers, feeling hopeful and inspired today. Thank you for all your teachings. Thank you for all the work that you do in the downtown east side with our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and grandmothers. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Also thank Davina. Wishing everyone a good day. This is our last session of the season, so starting again in September. We will be doing an evaluation survey, so please fill that out so we can ensure that we've got relevant topics on the Learning Circle. So, Haichika everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.